What's going on, everybody? This is the Talking Tactics podcast. We got a little bit of housekeeping to do, and I realized that in our haste or in our eagerness to kind of start the episode this week, we didn't even record an intro, and there was a few things that we needed to say and clear up. So I'm gonna take a few minutes to do that. This won't take more than 3-4 minutes, probably. If you want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, all that stuff is in the links in the description. Twitter's the main thing. We're trying to get 1,000 followers before the end of the new year. So or before the start of the new year, rather. So if you are on Twitter and you don't follow us, or if this is your first time listening, or whatever the case may be, remember to follow us. Everything is much appreciated. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow. Shout out to you guys. If you're on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review, and we will read it on the show. We had a few this week, so I'll try to read these as quick as I can so we can get into the show. This one comes from Great Britain. It says, brilliant podcast, a must listen. Absolutely love Talking Tactics and have done for a while. It gives a fresh perspective. It offers something that other football podcasts don't in an increasingly oversaturated market. Great analysis, coverage, and humor to boot with genuine chemistry and rapport between the guys and the fans. Keep up the great work, guys. Cheers, Ryan. So yeah, thank you for that review, man. This one comes from Canada. Listen to the pod every week. Love what you guys are doing. You guys used to review all of the Premier League games. Why did you guys stop doing that? Keep up the good work, Chelsea FC. From Twitch Cough. Why do we stop reviewing all the EPL games? Because a lot of the EPL games be trash, man. Let's keep it real. We love the league. It's like the greatest league in the world in terms of like sponsoring and fanship and attention and all that stuff. But we're not about to do 5 minutes of Burnley against Norwich. No disrespect to Burnley and Norwich, but come on, man. So I'd rather talk about Spain, Germany, Italy, France, Champions League, Europa League, societal issues, just anything else than, Aston Villa against Crystal Palace. Again, no disrespect, but there's more interesting things in football than the Premier League. And I think as a podcast that has a broad listenership, I think it's better for us if we talk about more things than just England. Yeah. And the games be trash. But yeah, thank you for that review. And last review from the United States, making Tuesdays a little bit better. Great show every week without fail. Only suggestion would be to actually set up the voicemail thing you guys mentioned a few weeks back. Stay Black from May 19, 2012. That's a Chelsea fan. We know. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to do that for free. So if somebody wants to hit me up and tell me how to do it for free, Talking Tactics on Twitter. DMs are open. How do you set up a voicemail? It's something I thought of, but it's not something I know how to execute, which is just about everything I think of in my life. So if somebody knows how to do that, get in contact with me. I'm a serial procrastinator, so I'll raise my hands in that sense. But yeah, it's something I want to do just to get you guys more. I'm noticing now I'm running out of time from the time I said. So this week's, we're on Patreon, of course. So if you guys want to help out the show monetarily, we record 30 to 40 minutes every week for you guys. If you want to take the time to go look through the tiers, $3 a month, and you get, 4 to 5 episodes of Talking Tactics plus access to the whole back catalog. I think we've done about 40 episodes. So 40 episodes times 35 minutes. You guys can work that out. It's like 20 hours of content. So yeah, you get access to that and, input on what we talk about if you feel so inclined to suggest things. So I encourage everybody, if you're interested in kind of the tangents that we go on in the regular podcast, then Talking Tactics it's good. And shout out to everybody that's a Patreon. I'm gonna have to start putting y'all names somewhere special or something like that. But yeah, pretty sure that's it. I'm rushing if you can't tell. Yeah, this week we had our great friend Paul. Shout out to Paul for being on the podcast this week from the United Rant cast. Always been dope. Always a great guest. We talked about gambling this week. And we're going to start the podcast in about 30 seconds. I do want to say the way this week's podcast went, like every international break, I think we're going to start doing these more directed, pointed conversations, which we kind of talk about before we start. But this is just one side, or largely one side, I think, of the gambling conversation. But there's another side. Eventually, we're going to come back to the topic. And I want to have somebody that's maybe not pro-gambling. I guess that's the wrong word. But maybe who's more amenable or open to the idea. And we can have kind of the different side of the same conversation, if you will. So this isn't like the Talking Tactics position necessarily on gambling. It's just one side of that conversation. So without further ado, this was just our conversation with Paul. Have hope comes in somewhere after maybe 5 minutes or so. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it, take something from it. So yeah, enjoy.
We had this running joke for the first 5 years of our podcast, basically, which was like, what's Phil Jones's best position? Because we just got asked it so many times in the first couple of seasons that he was at United.
Does he have one?
Oh, well, that was when everyone was deeply emotionally invested in the future of Phil Jones. I was going to say, I was like volunteering to be on the show after we won 4-0 against Chelsea. Last Monday, I wasn't very well. And if I'd been well, I was going to message you and be like, right, listen, I'm going to also volunteer to be on the show when we've lost 1-0 to Newcastle to show that I've got, I've got some backbone.
Do you know what? In my mind, I thought I was going to ask you, but then I was like, I don't want to ask just because United are trash. So I was like, you know what? I'll just leave it. That way, it felt almost like, I'd be picking on him if we didn't take the 4-0, but then they lost 1-0. It's like, yo, let's get Paul just so he can be miserable on the podcast. I was like, nah, I'm not even going to do that. So, all right. So the idea is we're going to just take on a topic during the international break. The first one we did was racism.
Yeah.
And there was something else. There was one topic that I had, but they didn't like it.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, what about gambling? Do you guys have thoughts on gambling? And Carl was like, gambling, that's probably a good one to do. So I reached out to you because I figured, again, it's probably closely related to what you do. So firstly, what are your thoughts just on gambling in general? And then we can get into the specifics on gambling in football.
Are we going? Are we properly on? Are we live?
We're live now.
Lovely.
We started.
So I think that, first of all, I want to make it very clear that when I'm going to talk quite negatively about the gambling industry and gambling in football for almost every opinion that I express in this show. And I want to make it clear that this is not about like morality, some sort of like biblical idea that gambling is a sin and the very concept of it should be wiped out from our society. So it's nothing like that. But I think it's the gambling industry is a plague on our society in a lot of ways. Like I think it's a manipulative, and I would go so far as to probably be quite comfortable using the word evil, which is obviously a very intense word. And I don't mean that everyone that works in it, everyone associated with it should all be kind of written off and described as like evildoers, but as a collective industry, I think it's an extraordinarily destructive force in society. Oh, it's the kid.
Yeah, Polio. Aloha. Bonsoir, mon ami.
Bonsoir.
Evil. You would consider it evil.
As an industry, I believe that a lot of its practices could be put into that bracket in terms of some of the worst excesses of the industry, and certainly in terms of the extraordinary damage it does to people's lives. Yeah.
Because this is a topic I've always just been interested in from somebody who's like on the outside looking in, right? And it seems like every shirt sponsor, or not every, but just like a majority of them in England,
a huge percentage.
So I was doing research before we started, and half of the Premier League teams, so West Ham, Everton, Wolves, Burnley, Palace, Newcastle, Watford, Villa, Bournemouth, and Norwich, all have casinos or some sort of, gambling thing on their shirts. In the Championship, 17 out of 24 teams have some form of casino or betting representation. And I was reading an article, and it was like Labour deregulated gambling in 2005. So does that have anything to do with this? Like, was it always like this before?
Well, it's interesting that you say 2005, because my memory of it was that things started to change in the first Labour government, the first Blairite Labour government in 97, where I think they took tax off gambling winnings, and bookmakers there were quite sort of restrictive Victorian laws about, I'm using Victorian not in a technical sense, in a sort of metaphorical sense, very old-fashioned laws about what bookmakers could look like. So from the outside, like the windows, you couldn't see into the bookmakers from outside, but now you can. So just for people listening, certainly people, I'm sure you have listeners in the States where gambling is incredibly highly regulated. It's much less regulated in the UK. So you can't walk down a UK high street without seeing at least one and probably more than one bookmaker. And interestingly, as the high street sort of deteriorates in popularity, in general, both in terms of the economics of austerity and the recession and all that kind of stuff here, but also in terms of the transition to online, bookmakers appear to be pretty thriving still, even kind of brick and mortar bookmakers. So I can't remember what the advertising laws were before 2005. I certainly remember big sporting events being sponsored by bookmakers. You would have the Ladbrokes so-and-so or whatever, or the William Hill championships in various sports and stuff. I feel like snooker, there was always big gambling sponsorships there. But the prevalence on shirt sponsors is almost mind-blowing how readily accepted it is.
The first one I noticed wasn't in England, though. I think the first one I noticed was like Real Madrid's B-Win. You remember those shirts? Like, yeah. I feel like that's the first time I ever why is that a sponsor? It's just like it never made sense to me. But like, I'm someone who doesn't gamble. So, another thing I read, between April 2017 and March 2018, did I say that right? Between April 2017 and March 2018, 14.4 billion pounds were lost to gambling.
Yeah.
So, like, people are really out here putting their money away, like, or just putting their money up, I suppose.
So one of the reasons why I would use the word evil to describe this, there is if you are a winning gambler, so it is possible, it's a myth to say that the house always wins. I mean, there are certain circumstances in which the house always wins. So if you walk into a casino to play any game other than poker, you are gambling against the house, and the house has a mathematical edge. So all casino games have a sliding scale of probability whereby the player has a disadvantage over the casino. So ultimately, this means if 1,000 bets are placed and the casino has, say, a 1% edge on every one of those 1,000 bets, over time, the law of probability will kick in and the house will win. In sports betting, there are people who can beat the game. So the guy that owns Brentford, for example, is a guy who developed a bunch of advanced analytics and modeling techniques. A lot of stuff around XG and things like that. A lot of that has been most applied by sports gamblers. So you can be a winning sports bettor. But to be a winning sports bettor, you can't just have a good hunch or whatever. You've got to do a ton of research, and in basketball, for example, people have been using analytics, and I believe the industry is somewhat caught up with the people using those tools and stuff. But anyway, I'm not an expert on that by any means. The thing is, though, if you're a winning sports bettor in the UK, your biggest challenge is going to be getting a bookmaker to accept your bet, because they don't accept bets from the people that are actually trying to work the system to their advantage. They only accept bets from punters, and punters lose money gambling over the long run. Like the way gambling odds are set up are to essentially, bookmakers are trying to offer less than the value of the real life value of the bet for each bet that they place, each bet that the punter places, essentially. So if the likelihood of something is genuinely 2-1, you won't get 2-1 odds on it. You'll get 1.5-1 odds. So just again, odds are described in different ways in different countries. So when I say 2-1, what I mean is you bet £1, and when you win, you get your stake of £1 back plus £2. So you win £2 for that £1 that you've put on. 1.5-1. If you win your bet, you'll get your stake of £1 back plus 150 on top of it. So yeah, the gambling industry is set up to take money away from its participants. It is not set up to enable people to win money off it.
So I bring all that just my little research that I did just to set up maybe there's a more pointed question to your profession. Like, what does this industry do to the people that participate in it from your experience?
There's a distinction to be made between it's very similar to the alcohol industry, right? Well,
Right.
There's a huge distinction to be made between people who are sat on a park bench drinking a bottle of cider and people who have a more hidden alcohol problem than that. Like, so they may be drinking, I don't know, a bottle of wine a night or something like that, which is a hugely addicted level of drinking. It's a very large amount of alcohol to be consuming regularly, but it has this kind of sheen of social normality or whatever. And everything in between and all the way down the other end of the spectrum. So there are people who are utterly destitute because of gambling addiction, you know, people who have lost absolutely everything in their lives. And very often those people are frowned upon by people that have not experienced addictions because it appears to be weakness or like a moral failing or bad decision making or all these kinds of things. But we'll come back to why that's not particularly accurate. But then there's all sorts of other levels of problem gambling too, where you're just like not paying as much attention to your kids as you would otherwise be because you're half distracted by your bet. And that's not taking over your life, but it's having a kind of subtly deleterious effect on your well-being and happiness. So, and then of course there are people who genuinely have no negative effects whatsoever from gambling, bar they're likely to lose a few pounds, but like £5 you can definitely afford to lose. I mean, there's an argument to say you could use that money better, but that's irrelevant. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. So I want to be really clear that there are plenty of people who are just like with alcohol. Any alcohol is poison, you know, in a technical sense, alcohol's a poison, but there's plenty of people for whom alcohol is not a problem in their lives in any way, shape or form who engage with alcohol. And it's the same for gambling. But if you're talking about people with genuinely problematic gambling addiction, then it just ruins lives. It ruins families. You know, when I use the word evil, one of the great scourges of watching any sport, but particularly football on television in the UK is gambling advertising. It is absolutely relentless. The gambling companies have done an amazing job of associating football with gambling, because every time the football stops, the gambling ads start. And that's in games where there's no gambling sponsorship being blasted at you while you're watching the game. There's one particular advert for gambling company, which every time I watch it, I could almost tear up with anger, to be honest. Like, that's the extent to how strongly I feel about it. And it's pitched as a comedic advert where there's one person on their phone talking about odds that are available on particular bets, and someone else is with them experiencing a terrible situation. Now, I believe there might be one on a spaceship or something, and like all the machinery is failing and they're going to crash, and one of them's just ignoring all that to look at his phone and gamble. And there's one where like they're in like a cold Arctic type setting, and the windows, I can't remember the specifics of it, but everything's about to go horribly wrong. And the guy who's gambling is ignoring all of that as the world falls apart around them. Now, that is pitched as a comedic, positive ad for a gambling company, and yet that is a horribly sick metaphor for what people with genuine gambling problems are doing in their lives. They're surrounded by their life falling apart around them. Their family might be crumbling. You get people who are, you know, like with drug addiction, you get people who end up stealing to fund their gambling addiction, all these kinds of things. And the gambling companies, of course, there's all sorts of, like with the alcohol adverts, you know, drink responsibly, drinkaware.co.uk, funded by the alcohol companies. The gambling companies are all saying, when the fun stops, stop. The thing about that is those messages have little to no bearing on a brain that is wired up for gambling addiction, wired into gambling addiction. So, and the gambling companies know this as well. Like, they know that that's not going to really do much. But anyway, so that was a long rant.
I was going to go kind of to have hope on that same subject. Like, do you find the gambling industry in England to be kind of overbearing in that way?
Because I don't gamble, it doesn't really bother me. But then I think it was my brother that brought up the point. That's like, man, look, do you know how much advertising these gamblers do? And you know how dangerous gambling can be. So I was like, oh, So then after he then said that, I was like, I then switched my brain, then really began to really look closely at the gambling advertising. I was like, oh my gosh, wow. I mean, do you know the actor Ray Winston?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I'm sure he must have done like a crazy deal with Ladbrokes, because literally his ad is always played before games, during games, after games, and everything like that. So it's like, I just think it's one of those things where like it has sort of embedded itself into the culture in England, and people just sort of view it as like, okay, this is normal and regular. But I don't think that people realize that gambling is as much of an addiction as smoking or drugs are, and there are people that could easily be susceptible to it and really fall danger to it. It's like my one of my cousins, he basically, like, I think he was, I don't know where it was gambling, but basically the people who are known who have lost loads of money from gambling, but they then made it again, but they lose loads. But I said, man, look at how much you've lost doing that. So my thing about it is that the things that nobody has brought it up, it has never really been a major issue or a major talking point, which means that either you don't have enough numbers of people who have really fallen victim to this, or people who've tried to change this have sort of been shut down, because these gambling companies make lots and lots of money. These guys make huge amounts of money. It's one of those things of where, like, I think once you really bear witness and you look at just how much, like, it's a loss. Like, once you actually start to notice the amounts that they advertise towards you to gamble. Just even, what's it called? Like, even whenever I'm around and there's like a match going on, and like one of my friends would be like on their phone, because they're just like doing this latest deal that this gambling company has sent to them, and they're like, oh yo HH1, you should get on this. I'm like, and I'm actually tempted, because I'm like, oh, that's actually a pretty good deal. So if I only put in £1, I get this, and I don't have to really be fully in there like that. So if I do £1, I'm slowly being coerced into doing it, and I'm like, oh no way. But it's like, there are so many different tricks that they use, subtle tricks that they use to try and get you initially, like that, because that's the key thing, is them just getting you the initial. Once they get you initially, then they now build you in, so gets you in for the long term. But then again, it's like, I think the way that people in England view it is that you're responsible for it. Is like, because I say it's the same as drugs, but the thing about the drug is there's a particular chemical within there that forces you to be addicted to it. But with something like gambling, it's literally just an enterprise.
This is the thing that I kind of knew was going to come up. And this is the kind of biggest myth about gambling addiction, is that it's not equivalent to drug or alcohol addiction.
No, but Paul, see, I was just playing devil's advocate there. Basically, I was saying...
But the thing about this particular argument is the devil's advocate, that you really are advocating for... Well, I don't mean this like I'm not, this is not my belief system or anything, but you effectively are advocating for the actual devil in this case, because it's like it's just like, so there was a brilliant episode of This American Life about gambling and some addicted gamblers who were putting a class action lawsuit together against a bunch of casinos, because they argued that the casinos were deliberately targeting their diminished responsibility. And it was very interesting. It's a fascinating episode. And one of the very interesting things about it is it's almost conclusive from all the evidence that absolutely these gambling companies were doing exactly that. But the lawyers in the end basically all agreed, spoiler warning, the lawyers all agreed that it wasn't actually a legal issue. And I think that's completely reasonable, that it's not a legal issue. But what is inarguable is that when you are actually in the throes of gambling addiction, what's happening in your brain is basically identical to what's happening in a drug or alcohol addiction. The chemical impact isn't external. So it's not like when you inject heroin, you obviously are flooding your system with a particular set of chemicals. But when you bet, when you're an addicted gambler, you are internally flooding your system with a set of chemicals that you'll be addicted to. You'll get the shakes. Your brain won't work properly when you don't gamble. You won't be able to you literally, and now when I say you won't be able, I mean very literally, without help and support or certain lifestyle changes and protective factors, you literally can't not gamble when you're in that state.
You know, I was reading something that said some people can't watch a match without placing a bet. It's almost impossible for them to watch a match and not bet.
The thing about that is, that's, you know, when I was talking about the kind of sliding scale of it earlier, the thing about that, there are a lot of people that wouldn't think that they've got any kind of gambling problem because they're not gambling money they can't afford, or they're not kind of suffering from any lifestyle stuff, but who also would never watch a match without putting a bet on it. And that's where it starts to be like a gray area. And that's where it starts to be like, to me, that's in the realm of personal choice, and you know, like, good luck to you. You can, that there's no, when I'm saying like my position on this isn't moral, it's about how the industry behaves and how that affects people who genuinely don't have agency, proper agency over their actions. That doesn't mean you can't reclaim when you're addicted to gambling, just like when you're addicted to drugs or alcohol. Recovery is absolutely possible with the right help and support, with the right structures and stuff. That's absolutely correct. But you know, one of the things, so when people are trying to give up drink, like people who are properly addicted to alcohol and they're trying to give up, one of the things that's incredibly hard is, in some ways, giving up alcohol is actually harder than giving up heroin, because they don't sell heroin in supermarkets, you know, and yet you can't walk around the shop without seeing the thing that you're addicted to. That's a big challenge. And gambling is, of course, the same. It's so omnipresent. You know, you were talking about the culture, and this is just one brief example. I'll try and be, I said brief, that I'm making big promises. I'm writing checks I can't cash when I say brief. But during the Cricket World Cup, it was absolutely fascinating, because every day there was a different game on. And when there was an England game on, every single advert in the advertising breaks was for gambling company. But when it was Bangladesh against India, every single advert was for send money back home companies. So it was really telling, like, the gambling companies were massively culturally targeting, you know, the England games. And in terms of football, that, you know, you mentioned the sums of money. Well, we all know the Premier League is making its money from TV deals. Now, a huge amount of that is international money, which is not, as far as I understand it, so universally backed by gambling ads. Certainly you wouldn't see that in adverts in the States or whatever. But in the UK, the TV deal is absolutely enormous. And of course, some of that money is coming from the subscriptions that people directly pay. Because, by the way, we are paying to be advertised to by these gambling companies. These are adverts on paid television. So you're paying like 30 quid a month for your Sky Sports subscription and then getting advertised to. But the money that is flowing into football from the television companies, well, apart from the money that's coming directly out of our pockets in subscriptions, the money that's flowing into the television companies is coming from gambling companies.
You know, it's interesting. Like, when Halfhope brought up, you know, they give like good deals and stuff, and like it kind of entices you to get in. You guys, I don't know, maybe like a show like The Wire or something like that, where like
the first hit's free, baby.
Exactly. Where like they give you like the first little hit for free, and then it's like now we've kind of got you on the hook and we can reel you in. It made me think of like The Wire or some show like that. We're like, yo, they give you like free bets essentially, and then once you get the free bet and you might win, then it's like, it triggers that thing in your brain, like, hey, I can make some money doing this. Or you know, it might play into the idea of, I know football, you know, that kind of arrogance.
100%. This is the thing that I was saying earlier about the people that beat the system aren't the people who like know quite a lot about football. The people that beat the system are the people who are crunching numbers that no one else is crunching, basically. And I also, it's so wholesome that your examples about drug use are from TV programs, Daniel. That's like really wholesome.
I mean, I don't have first-hand experience.
Yeah, right, man.
But yeah, what first-hand experience with cocaine? Definitely off TV, like off TV. But anyway, Halfhope, do you think there's anyone who gambles that watches your like pre-matches and like makes decisions off of that?
Well, some people have, because sometimes I get the score right, and sometimes I think there was like a very mini run, because look, you can never predict things. They can never, but there was a mini run where like I was getting quite a few scores right. Then whenever I did, like, before I would do my pre-match, I would get messages saying, "Oh, yo, HH man, I'm thinking of putting a bet. What score do you think this match will be?" Then I would sort of jokingly say, like, "Yo, I don't really want to endorse betting, but if you do bet and my score is right, I should get a portion of your winning." So that's what I would say. But I would say, you're really going to spend money on my prediction? Because obviously, for me, I've given it a lot of thoughts. I've thought about, okay, like, what this team will do, the stages, the likelihood. I'm looking at different kinds of patterns and everything. But at the end of the day, nobody can predict the future.
And when you're using one person's, this podcast has like talked at extensive length about the eye test versus the stats test. And one thing's for absolutely sure: if you want to be a professional gambler, do not be trying to use the eye test. Like, you're just, then your ego is definitely going to be costing you money. And those kind of sign-up deals, it's not just about the first tastes free for the people who get hugely addicted. It's like, if you sign up to a gambling company, the vast most likely outcome is that over your lifetime you lose money to them. And if that's completely worth it to you for the kind of fun that you get from the bet and the buzz that you get from the times that you win the bet, then you're not causing any harm to yourself or anyone else. That's then that's not an issue. It's just that any industry who's making, like mobile phone games, like stuff like Clash of Clans and these mobile phone games, the way they are basically marketed and targeted is to try to, they're about blasting to vast numbers of people, because a small percentage of those people will spend a gargantuan fortune. So it's the same as the casino model of the whale. They're looking for the person who's going to spend £250,000 lifetime on a video game, and those people definitely exist. So the gambling model is kind of similar to that. For every kind of, I don't know, let's say every 50,000 people that you get to sign up to a gambling site, one or two of those people are going to spend a vast fortune in their lifetime on that gambling site. Now, some of those people might be billionaires with vast disposable incomes, but some of those people are definitely going to be vulnerable people who have been targeted by gambling adverts and lost the run of their lives. And then that's even before you start to talk about people who are already addicted gamblers trying to recover whilst constantly having how cool and fun gambling is blasted at you.
Do you know what that reminds me of? Like, do you ever play like FIFA Ultimate Team, or of this?
Oh,
yeah.
Like, there are people that has paid like £30,000 a year or something like that just to get cards, and then like I guess you open the packs and you don't know what you're gonna get from the packs, so you get that kind of dopamine hit or whatever it is, and people just sit there and use their parents' credit cards and their parents' money, and they just like rack up a bunch of debt to EA Sports or whatever it is. Like, it just
absolutely. And by the way, it's not an accident that those packs are blind packs, and it's not an accident that there's a cool animation when you open what I've not actually played FIFA Ultimate Team, but like many games have the same principle. It's not an accident. It's because there's something in us that plays to the heart of. It gets us in a certain way, that kind of thing, and it does trigger stuff buried deep within us. And the people that are designing these things are very smart. Casino games designers are very smart. They're all about like trying to get your little dopamine hits going. So yeah, it's that I used the word evil earlier because I genuinely believe that there's very significant manipulation going on to benefit a small number of people at the cost of a large number of people.
Okay, another tidbit that I researched. This is from Chris Eaton, who's the executive director at the International Center for Sports Security. Right? He says up to €1 billion are bet on each Premier League match. and that's like including legal and illegal gambling.
Yeah, and the percentage of gambling globally that is illegal is a huge percentage.
Right. I think he said something like 80%.
Yeah, that was the figure that I saw recently. But the thing about that number is, of course, that includes, like, if me and you, Dan, are like, oh, I bet you a fiver that United will beat Chelsea, and you're like, yeah, okay, you're on. That's technically illegal gambling, I believe.
Why would you never bet that right now?
I certainly would. I wouldn't. It might not come as a massive shock to anyone listening to this that I'm not a gambler. And I certainly wouldn't make that bet. You'd have to offer me a hell of a price anyway.
Yo, so Paul, have you ever bet in your life? Like,
yeah, of course. Like, basically, almost everything that I don't do now, I've done once, at least. I when I was about 18, I got weirdly into horse racing, which I have. Like, was because I was not in a good place in my life, to be honest. I've never placed a bet on a football match, but that's mostly because like football betting was nowhere near what it is now when I was younger.
So, like sometimes I do look at like the odds and like look at my bank account and I'm like, yo, if I put my whole bank account on this, I'd end up with like 100,000 or whatever it is. Like when Leicester won the title, and I think they had like 5,000 to 1 odds. I was like, yo, so if I put 5,000 of my dollars on that, that would be like what, like 25 million or something like that.
Yeah, but they probably wouldn't pay you that 25 million. That's the other thing. Yeah, there are exceptions to that. The Leicester 5,000 to 1 is a bit of an exception to that because there was so much publicity around that number that they almost kind of have to pay it out as a PR thing. But you won't always get your big payouts if you make enormous wins in bookmaking.
Really? Isn't that illegal?
I am not sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure they don't do any. They're not out there doing stuff that's illegal, but there's all manner of loopholes and stuff like that.
So yeah. That was kind of the end of my stats. The other one is just a thing on suicide that kind of shocked me. It says addicts are 6 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
That's just something I wrote down. But...
Definitely. I mean, I don't know how you would exactly quantify the percentage and the. Yeah, I mean, that's that. But it's there's definitely lots of people that have killed themselves because of gambling addiction, and certainly people who've got themselves to the point of being close to that because it feels like a trap you can't get out of. And by the way, if you're struggling, it is a trap that you can get out of. Help is out there, and even when you feel like you've tried and it hasn't worked. The way addiction recovery works is you try and it doesn't work, and then one time you do it and it works, and your life's much better forever, basically. And that's, relapse is part of recovery. So the cycle of addiction is broken by, very rarely is the cycle of addiction broken at the first attempt, but if you keep trying, it will inevitably be broken if you have the right support around you.
I'll go to both of you with this. I guess it's kind of the final point here. Do you think that the gambling culture in the UK is too far gone to ever be kind of brought back or reeled in any? Or is this just what it is?
Unless there's a massive seismic cultural change, I think that it is so embedded and so normalized that it's going to be quite hard for it to turn. Basically, the only way that it's going to turn is if, let's say, you have a major story where, like, this family, preferably white family, have, like, their son or this thingy was betting, preferably white, preferably upper middle class. If, let's say, their son gets into gambling, spends a lot, and then they lose a lot of money, then they commit suicide, it's a major big story.
That's happened thousands of times. That exact scenario you just described has happened at least hundreds of times this century. That's not a story. That would not be a story. It will be a 1-page story, and there's no, and that's.
No, because I've never heard of maybe I've missed it, but I've never heard of a story of like a white middle upper class family where their child committed suicide because they lost a lot of money through gambling. I've not really heard that story. Because if, let's say, if the person is from a poor family, lower middle class family, Black, Asian or something, then who cares? If it's a upper middle class white family.
No, listen. I think of course. Basically, when it comes to questions of race, I'll always listen to what your guys' experience is above my own, because I know it's a different level of experience, and it's but this particular subject, this particular one, this doesn't respect. This doesn't care about this. This is a prevalent problem at all different levels. And obviously, if you're more insulated from problems in general, so if you're more financially insulated or socially insulated, but this one, there are definitely plenty of rich people that have killed themselves because of gambling. That's a complete red herring to look in that direction, because
but I think for me, my thing is the particular kind of ingredients of what happens, because obviously 100% they've been rich people, but maybe that rich person was in their 40s, a father, an older person, a bachelor or something. My main thing is a particular concoction, white upper middle class. It's the son, it's the daughter, it's of a family that's very maybe linked into the royal family, linked into a very rich, powerful family. Once that happens, they get really sad, and then that family now says, this whole gambling thing really affected us. They go on to Good Morning Britain, they go on to BBC News, they tell the story of how their child was very much into gambling. We didn't really know about this sort of stuff, and we now talk question about gambling advertising. It's that particular concoction that I feel the beginnings of changing the thing.
I just Googled young man kills himself because of gambling addiction. The first result from that Google search in The Telegraph, the home of it's a very right-wing upper-class paper. Young accountant was driven to suicide by gambling addiction, his father says. Joshua Jones had gained a job with one of the world's most prestigious accountancy firm. A young high-flying accountant who plunged to his death from a London skyscraper died of shame after his online gambling addiction spiraled out of control, his father said. 23 years old, PricewaterhouseCoopers. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was in April 2016. That story is happening. And that's the first result of the Google search. You will find plenty all the way down the line. The industry is way more powerful than one high profile story. The only way this culture changes is if culture changes in huge, sweeping ways. Basically, not to get too into it here, but you would be talking about this would need the death of capitalism for this to change, because there's just far too much money involved, in my opinion.
These are some of the biggest, most profitable, most protected corporations in England. Ladbrokes is huge. It's huge. So once you're dealing with corporations that have their claws seeped into the very important fabric of English society, and England really, really knows how to protect particular institutions, I think, which is what Paul said, there just has to be a complete culture change, complete and total culture change. And that's, you're looking at 20, 25, 30 years for a culture to really change. So
basically, in my opinion, Dan, the answer to that question would be how would you change the culture of Las Vegas to be not about gambling? Like, Britain is basically one giant Las Vegas. Every street corner, every pub has a fruit machine in it. That's like a slot machine. Every motorway service station. So if you drive from one city to another and you stop to get a cup of coffee, there'll be a little area set off aside with the 18 only sign on it and a lot of gambling machines behind it. Just because you want to stop and get a cup of coffee, that's the extent of it. You know how in Las Vegas, I only know from television and movies. There are fruit machines in the airports. Exactly. There's at the end of Ocean's 13. There's that slot machine in the airport scene. That's literally what I was thinking of. Here, there would be there's slot machines at every railway station in the country. There's slot machines in chip shops. This country is one giant Vegas. So yeah, if you wanted to, it's the same question. Could there ever not be a gambling culture in Vegas? That's the same as the question of, could there ever be in Britain?
Damn.
I think that this is one of those things where hope would be on hope present. I don't mean present company. I mean the actual concept of hope comes from individual change, and what's really important is if that you're caught in that trap, or people that are caught in that trap, that that change is possible on that level, on a personal level, like recovery is possible. That's where you would target your energies, because trying to destroy the gambling industry, listen, there's just how do we destroy anything that's worth that kind of money? It's I don't know how that's done.
Do you know what? Okay, I feel like if you were pro gambling, I would ask you like the same question, but in reverse. Like, do you have anything good to say about it? Paul is clearly anti-gambling.
No, I am anti the gambling industry.
Yeah, anti the gambling. It's like, is there anything redeeming about this thing?
About the gambling industry?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe the gambling industry. I mean, it offers, I don't know, some people get employment out of it or whatever.
Do you know what? I feel like we've had conversations like, you know how if you listen to, I don't even want to put names out there. So, if you listen to certain podcasts, right? Then they like have just kind of like the 30-second advertisement at the beginning. Yeah. Such and such are giving away, a free bet here or there. I'm like, I don't think we would ever do that if like a gambling company came up to us and was like, we'll give you X amount of money. It's probably really easy to take, but I don't think I could do it morally.
So I've been running a podcast which I would describe as like, I mean, it's not on the level of those kind of podcasts, but it's pretty successful as like, two mates talking about football podcasts go. And up until quite recently, almost literally the only sponsorship we've ever been offered has been gambling sponsorship, and that's why we're crowdfunded. I'm not taking those people's money. Never. Like, if you need to feed your family, you need to feed your family. But that's a totally different kettle of fish. So I'm not. If it's life or death for you, you do whatever job you have to do. Right? We all know that. But personally, we never would have contemplated. It was like one of our earliest rules was like, absolutely no way we're doing gambling sponsorship.
Do we have a price?
Price? What do you mean by price?
Like, do we have a price to where we would like sell out Talking Tactics to like a gambling industry?
178 million.
Oh, you know what? I might do it for 178 million. I'll use all that money to fund recovery projects. The Football Ramble are sponsor. Their lead sponsor for the last number of seasons has been a betting company, various different betting companies, in fact. And they do this thing every week where they would do a £50 bet, and the proceeds would go to prostate cancer, because nothing that companies like this like more than making positive connections to their work. But I always wanted to do a calculation whereby how much money Prostate Cancer UK would have got if they'd just given them 50 quid every week rather than gambled, whether it would be more or less over the number of, they did that, I think, for 2 seasons straight. I always thought that would be an interesting experiment, because I'm not sure what the answer was. And the one thing I would say, like the only positive thing that I would say about gambling as a concept is, for some people, it's just fun. It's like harmless fun. It wouldn't be my cup of tea for harmless fun. But that would be the closest thing I would get to saying something good about it.
I would feel that you should be able to have enough strength to not be sucked into overspending your money and gambling, but it is you have to recognize that it is an addiction. So even if I feel that I've got the willpower, because again, real Ronaldo lost me £5 in 2006. Ever since then, I said I'm never gambling again. But that's just me. Some people were like, okay, I lost, but maybe I'll go back. For me, I was like, no. Once I lost it, he still owes me £5. That's it. I'm never gambling again. But I can't speak for everyone. So not everyone has my kind of willpower. So for those people that don't have that kind of willpower, I think gambling companies have to really think about, are you really on the right side of morality, the way that you're going about doing the stuff?
Yeah, and just it's incredibly toxic and insidious and damaging and wrong, and spreading wrong ideas and wrong mythologies about mental health in general, to ever use the word strength anywhere near a conversation like this, because it's like saying I'm too strong to be depressed, too mentally strong to be depressed. It's nonsense. The word strength has nothing to do with it. It's all about incredibly complicated neurological processes and a combination of like inherited vulnerabilities and life experience, vulnerabilities that have come about as a consequence of life experience, and the kind of incredible complex web of other factors too, like nutrition, environment, all sorts of different things that leave a brain vulnerable or not vulnerable to a particular kind of addiction. So the idea that people should be strong enough to make good decisions is just completely, it's like one of the most dangerous myths in our society, basically. And essentially that's how the gambling industry exists, is this kind of, George Monbiot, he writes about the climate crisis a lot, and he talks about
I've heard
the idea that he wrote a beautiful article where he was talking about the idea that collective response to the climate crisis should be individuals making small changes in their life, is like, not that you shouldn't do that, but this is like the key neoliberal myth of our times. Basically, it's the lie of capitalism that says if you just make better decisions, this wouldn't be happening. But actually, it's effectively about massive global polluters on a scale way beyond any of our imaginings, that have nothing or very little to do with the choices that we make, and in fact have imposed choices upon us for generations. So with gambling, like the idea that you can, in fact, the gambling ads literally say bet responsibly, or that's one of the taglines, I believe. They certainly do that with drink responsibly. It's like you just don't understand brain chemistry, because you literally have diminished ability to act responsibly when you're in the grip of an addiction. So it's not about willpower and it's not about strength. Where willpower starts to come into it is that it's important to think about willpower like a muscle. So willpower is something that can be built where it is lacking, and that's where willpower becomes a useful idea, because when you're in recovery, you need to do lots of small acts that help you slowly build willpower over time, not just believe that, oh my god, I'm too weak to do this. So yeah, sorry, I feel like I've talked non-stop. This is a subject very close to my heart, as you can tell.
Yeah, it's cool.
Do you want to like make fun of Man United for a minute, just to like lighten the mood a bit? Because you're welcome to. You are welcome to.
Have hope. You got any bars ready to go?
No. Like I have no. Like literally, like there's nothing more needs to be. That it's not even funny anymore. There's nothing more.
You know what I heard?
It's still funny.
I heard Mourinho is being linked with the job again. Is that true?
Say it's not funny. One that I've not heard that you've
okay.
But you have just done it. You've just linked Mourinho with the job, so that's beautiful.
Yeah.
The one thing I was like, I was so happy that Solskjaer got the job. So happy, because I love him so much, and I definitely believed it was possible. But I just want to say that just because I'm an idiot about football doesn't mean that all the rest of the stuff I said today, this is something I actually know stuff about, not fun like football.
You know, Solskjaer is partly your fault. Like, you came back on Twitter to help stoke the PSG celebrations, so you aren't blameless.
I very nearly came back on Twitter because of the Colleen Rooney thing. It's just like, I just want to get in on the jokes, but instead I just read through. I still don't know what that's
about. Like, I haven't taken the time out to read anything. So
this is the best football story in 50 years.
I don't give a shit.
No, the not caring about this, I get it, right, in a way, but the fun that you miss out on by not caring about this story, you miss out on some really good tweets, Dan. That's all I'm saying.
Well, there you go. So yeah, this is our podcast with Paul. Are we gonna come back on Monday, Double H, or you think this is good enough?
No. I think we should use this for the Monday thing, man.
All right, cool. So yeah, this is Talking Texas podcast. Paul Ansorge, we thank you.
Can I ask one question?
You can.
But this is a genuine question. How are the Nigerian national team getting on, Hope? Are they like looking good for next big tournaments?
No. For me, I think what they've realized is that they're bringing in the younger people. So obviously, Victor Osimhen is obviously the main striker now, and he's been doing amazing stuff for Lille. And obviously, what's it called? Chukwueze from Villarreal So I think what is basically it's you just have to just wait and see. But I think the good thing is that it's now the younger team. So Mikel has retired, Igala has retired, so the older guys have retired, and I think you're now seeing some interesting young boys now coming through the team. So hopefully with that, maybe things will be bright. So see what happens on Sunday against Brazil.
Good luck.
All right.
Good luck to the Super Eagles.
Merci. Thank you.
Yo, can I ask, why did the women's team have a different name than the men's team?
Oh no! All the young
and all the Nigerian teams have different names, right?
Like the Golden Eaglets, I believe. Then I think yes. Basically, the Golden Eaglets, I think, is under 17. The Flying Eagles are the under 20, 21. Falcons are the women's team. Super Eagles are the men's team. So every iteration has a different name.
I kind of like that. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, it was just something I wondered. It's like, why does every team have a different name? But anyway, Talking Tactics podcasts. Paul, where can people find you?
Yeah, if you like listening to people cry into microphones about how terrible Manchester United are, then you can listen to our podcast, which is the United Rant cast. We do it roughly once a week. And if you like pictures of the nature that I see, then you can follow me on Instagram at Peaceful Paul.
Are you ever inside?
I'm always inside, but I don't take many photos inside.
Okay. Have Hope, where can people get you?
Hit me up on Twitter at HaveHopeHot or hit my website, havehopefootballhot.com.
You should follow Hope on Instagram because this is really good Instagram, like little clips about what he thinks about movies and football matches and what he's having.
I mean, because I even want to try and do more Insta lives now and everything, But yeah, man. No, but also, I'll also like sometimes whenever Paul posts his, could always post something random but very soothing. So it may be like some place with like flowers coming through, but it's like, that's a very pretty picture, but it just sort of soothes you. So I think it's like the soothing soul.
Do you? Is this all with like your camera phone, or do you have like an actual camera?
It's all with the phone, man, which is mad. I can't get over how good you can take photos with camera phones nowadays.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Anyway, yeah, I'm at Daniel to look. This is at Talking Tactics. Yo, have hope. I watched Joker, so we can talk about that.
All right. We'll talk. But very briefly, did you not like, didn't care?
Didn't care.
No, it's Ed game all over again.
I told you I watched it and I had a discussion with her. But anyway, yeah, Talking Tactics podcast, sometimes funny,
sometimes serious.
Always football.
I love this show, by the way. I love this show. So it's such an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.